Greetings, seekers of truth and efficiency. Before we embark on our deep dive into the world of ancient wisdom and modern technologies, I want to ask you to perform one simple but extremely important action. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video right now. Your activity helps algorithms understand the value of such serious topics and motivates us to create even more quality content for your development. And now, let's transport ourselves to the epicenter of global innovations. Imagine sunny California, offices of glass and concrete, where the code that controls our reality is written. It would seem that here, in Silicon Valley, exceptional futurism and a complete rejection of the past should reign. However, if you look into the offices of top managers of technology giants, or examine the reading lists of unicorn startup founders, you will discover a surprising paradox. Instead of the latest guides on agile management or marketing strategies, their desks hold worn copies of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca's moral letters, and Epictetus's discourses. Why has Stoicism, a philosophy that originated on the painted porticos of Athens and flourished in the Roman Empire more than 2,000 years ago, suddenly become the unofficial religion and primary mental operating system for the elite of the tech world? The answer lies in the very nature of modern entrepreneurship. Silicon Valley is an environment of extreme uncertainty, tremendous psychological pressure, and sky-high stakes. It's a world where billion-dollar fortunes can be created or destroyed in a single day, where competition is ruthless, and the speed of change exceeds the human psyche's ability to adapt. In such conditions, traditional stress management methods cease to work. Entrepreneurs realized they didn't need an abstract theory about the meaning of life or complex metaphysics. They needed an extremely practical tool, a kind of armor for the mind, allowing them to maintain icy calm and clarity of thought when chaos reigned all around. Stoicism offered them precisely that. For Valley leaders, it became not just a philosophical hobby, but a set of clear algorithms for decision-making in crisis situations. Visionaries like Tim Ferriss, Jack Dorsey, Kevin Rose, and many others turned to Stoicism because it teaches the foundation of leadership resilience, the dichotomy of control, the ability to rigidly and uncompromisingly divide events into those we can control and those beyond our power. For a CEO responsible for the fate of thousands of employees and investors' money, this distinction becomes the only way to avoid emotional burnout and paralysis of will. Stoicism in Silicon Valley is not a fad or intellectual snobbery. It's a pragmatic choice for people accustomed to optimizing everything, including their own consciousness. This philosophy teaches how to turn obstacles into a path and problems into opportunities, transforming fear of the unknown into fuel for action. This is why ancient texts have become bedside books for the creators of the future, and it is with an understanding of this phenomenon that we will begin our journey to how Stoicism can help your business specifically. To understand why Stoicism is today called the unofficial operating system of Silicon Valley, we need to go back 23 centuries to Athens. The irony of fate is that this philosophy was born as a result of what we would today call a grand business failure. The founder of Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, was a successful Phoenician merchant who was transporting a shipment of precious purple dye. During a storm, his ship was wrecked, and he lost all his fortune overnight. Finding himself penniless in Athens, he entered a bookstore, began reading Xenophon, and eventually founded his school. He would later famously say, "I made my most successful voyage when I suffered shipwreck."
This was perhaps the first historical example of radical reframing of a crisis situation, a skill critically important for any entrepreneur today. However, Stoicism did not remain a Greek theory. It flourished in Rome, becoming a philosophy of action for people vested with power and responsibility. We see Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in the Roman Empire, who was essentially an investment banker and political advisor of his time. He wrote about how to manage wealth without becoming its slave, and how to maintain clarity of mind when lives and states were at stake. We see Epictetus, a former slave, who taught that true freedom is not status, but control over one's own mind, a concept that formed the basis of modern cognitive behavioral therapy. And of course, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who can be called the CEO of the ancient world. Managing a vast empire during a period of wars and epidemics, he kept a diary not intended for publication, where he reminded himself of discipline, humility, and duty. His meditations are in essence the notes of a person experiencing colossal stress and responsibility, seeking a way to remain an effective and just leader. Let's fast forward to the 21st century. Why have these ancient texts suddenly appeared on the nightstands of Jeff Bezos, Tim Ferriss, and thousands of startup founders? Because the context has changed, but the nature of stress remains the same. Modern business is an environment of high uncertainty, where external factors, from search engine algorithms to economic crises, are beyond our control. Stoicism offers not just solace, but a practical toolkit for decision-making in such conditions. From Zeno to modern CEOs, a direct line of succession can be traced. It is the teaching of how to divide the world into what we can control and what we cannot, and how to direct all our energy solely towards the former. Today's leaders turn to the Stoics not for academic interest, but for the mental endurance necessary to survive in the competitive race. Let's move on to the fundamental principle that Epictetus placed at the forefront of his philosophy, and which for modern business is perhaps the most underestimated risk management tool. This is the dichotomy of control. In the context of entrepreneurship, it is not just a philosophical abstraction, but a strict algorithm for allocating a founder's attention and energy resources. The essence of the concept is simple, but its implementation requires rigorous intellectual discipline. All phenomena in the world are divided into two categories, those that depend on us and those that do not. It seems trivial, but let's analyze the typical behavior of an entrepreneur in a stressful situation. We spend colossal amounts of nervous energy worrying about exchange rates, geopolitical shifts, new social media ranking algorithms, or the mood of a key investor. Stoicism offers us a sobering truth. All of the above is outside our direct control. By trying to manage these variables or reacting emotionally to them, we make a managerial error. We invest our most expensive resource, our attention, in zero-return assets. The dichotomy of control proposes to reprogram this approach, shifting the focus from the desired outcome to the quality of the process. The metaphor of the archer is often used in Stoic literature. The archer has full power over preparing the bow, choosing the arrow, training their body, concentrating their attention, and the moment they release their fingers. But once the arrow leaves the string, it is no longer subject to the archer. A sudden gust of wind or movement of the target are external factors. A good Stoic archer evaluates their success not by hitting the bullseye, but by how flawlessly they executed the shot. Translating this into business terms, you must realize you do not control the final profit because it depends on the market. You do not control the client's purchasing decision.
But you have total control over the quality of your product, the cleanliness of the code, the sales department's scripts, your marketing strategy, and how you react to crises. Applying the dichotomy of control allows you to instantly reduce anxiety levels. When you encounter a problem, ask yourself one question: can I influence this? If the answer is no, as in the case of a global recession, your task is not to worry, but to adapt. Accept it as a weather phenomenon. If the answer is yes, then you are obliged to direct all your energy there, to act aggressively and precisely, without being distracted by the fear of failure. This transforms the entrepreneur from a player hoping for luck into a professional who methodically works on variables within their influence. This is the highest form of responsibility, to ignore the noise in order to focus on the signal you generate yourself. We move on to a fundamental principle that can completely transform management strategy. Epictetus began his teachings by dividing everything into two categories: what depends on us and what does not depend on us. In the context of business, this rule becomes the main filter for allocating resources, be it money, time, or the team's mental energy. Most entrepreneurs fall into the trap of trying to control external factors. We worry about currency fluctuations, panic over sudden actions by competitors, get upset about global economic crises, or a key client's bad mood. The paradox is that by focusing on these external circumstances, we lose our grip on where we truly have power. Stoicism teaches us to draw a clear line. What is completely within your power? It's the quality of your product, the clarity of your business processes, the corporate culture you build, and how thoroughly you prepare for negotiations. It's your judgments, your reactions to problems, and your honesty with partners. This is where 100% of the company's resources should be directed. What is not within your power? It's the client's final decision, market behavior, new laws, or weather that can disrupt logistics. A Stoic does not ignore these factors. They account for them as input data, as problem conditions, but they do not invest their emotions in them and do not try to change what cannot be changed. Let's use the classic Stoic metaphor of the archer. The entrepreneur is an archer. It is within your power to choose the best bow, perfectly string it, account for the wind, aim, and make a smooth release. This is the process, and it is entirely under your control. But once the arrow has flown, the outcome is no longer up to you. A gust of wind can knock the arrow off course, or the target might move. If you measure your success only by hitting the target, you will constantly be in a state of stress and vulnerability. But if you measure success by the quality of your shot, by how flawlessly you performed your part of the work, you become invincible. In business, this means shifting focus from result to process. Instead of agonizing over whether this product will sell, you focus on whether you've done everything possible to make it worth buying and whether you've communicated its value as clearly as possible. When you stop expending energy trying to control the uncontrollable, a colossal amount of resources frees up to improve what truly depends on you. This is the secret to efficiency. Ignore the noise and perfect the signal. Separating spheres of influence allows a leader to maintain a cool head in chaos because they know exactly where the levers of control are and where there are simply decorations they cannot move. Imagine opening your morning sales report. The numbers are down 15% compared to last week. This is an objective fact, a raw event that is neutral in itself. But what happens in your head in the first few seconds? A chain of emotional reactions immediately kicks in. Fear whispers that the trend will continue.
Anxiety paints pictures of a cash flow gap at the end of the month. Your ego perceives this as a personal defeat or team incompetence. It is at this moment, according to Stoic teaching, that a fatal distortion of reality occurs. You no longer see the metric as it is. You see your interpretation, heavily colored by panic or disappointment. Epictetus said that people are not troubled by things themselves, but by the opinions they form about things. In the context of entrepreneurship, this means that emotions act as murky glass through which you view your business dashboard. When you are under the influence of strong emotions, be it euphoria from sudden success or terror from losing a major client, your brain starts to fit data to your mood. This is what modern behavioral economists call confirmation bias, but the Stoics recognized this mechanism thousands of years ago. Let's consider this more deeply. When an entrepreneur experiences anxiety, they tend to focus only on negative metrics. They see the rising cost of customer acquisition, but ignore the increase in average check and customer lifetime value. Their perception narrows to a tunnel vision of the problem. Decisions made in such a state are usually reactive. You start sharply cutting budgets, firing employees, or changing strategy, not based on mathematical analysis, but on a desire to get rid of internal discomfort. You try to fix your mood, not the business process. On the other hand, positive emotions distort metrics no less dangerously. When a project flies and graphs are going up, pride and vanity make you ignore danger signals. You might miss the moment when growth became unmanageable, or fail to notice that unit economics stopped making sense at scale. You think you're a genius, though perhaps you just got lucky with seasonality. Stoic discipline of perception requires us to look at numbers without attachment to the outcome. Marcus Aurelius advised wiping away impressions and seeing things in their naked nature. Applied to business analytics, this means the following. A number in a report is neither good nor bad. It is a feedback signal from the market. It is simply data. As soon as you learn to cut off the emotional label your brain automatically attaches to each metric, you will gain a superpower unavailable to most competitors. You will be able to look at a drop in revenue with the cold curiosity of a scientist who noticed an anomaly in an experiment, rather than with the terror of a victim. This allows you to ask the right questions, not why me or who is to blame, but what is the cause of this deviation and what actions are objectively necessary now. Managing perception is the hygiene of a leader's mind. Emotions are bad advisors when working with data because they always dwell either in the past, regretting mistakes, or in the future, fearing uncertainty. Metrics, however, are always in the present. To work with them effectively, you need to bring your mind back to the here and now state, cleansing it of passions. Only in a state of stoic calm, so-called apathy in the philosophical sense, i.e. dispassion, can you see the true picture of your business and not a projection of your fears on an Excel spreadsheet. We move on to the sixth and perhaps most counterintuitive part of our methodology. Ancient Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. In the modern world, we are accustomed to hearing advice about the need for positive thinking, visualizing success, and believing in the best outcome. Stoicism, however, offers the entrepreneur a diametrically opposite approach, which, strangely enough, is a much more reliable foundation for strategic planning. The essence of the negative visualization technique is not to become a pessimist or to sink into anxiety. It is a cool-headed exercise in modeling worst-case scenarios. Seneca said that a blow we have foreseen hurts less.
In the context of business, this means intentionally setting aside time to imagine what exactly could go wrong. Imagine your key supplier going bankrupt. Imagine your lead developer leaving for a competitor on the day of release. Imagine a new law making your business model illegal, or a cash flow gap occurring a month earlier than predicted. In modern management, there is a direct analog to this Stoic practice called pre-mortem,
or pre-mortem project analysis. Unlike a post-mortem, where we dissect the errors of an already failed project, a pre-mortem is done at the start. You gather your team and say, imagine that a year has passed and our project has spectacularly failed. This is already a done deal. Now let's write the story of this failure. What exactly killed us? This exercise has colossal strategic value. When we plan from the present moment to the future, we tend to be optimistic and ignore risks. But when we use a retrospective view from an imaginary failure, our brain works differently. We begin to see blind spots. You suddenly realize that your dependence on a single marketing channel is not just a risk, but a guaranteed cause of company death if platform algorithms change. Premeditatio malorum allows you to translate vague, paralyzing anxiety into a list of specific tasks. Instead of fearing an abstract crisis, you create Plan B, Plan C, and Plan D. You hedge risks, diversify assets, and create backup copies of processes. The psychological aspect here is no less important than the operational. When an entrepreneur has mentally lived through the worst-case scenario, they lose their fear of it. You understand that even if the worst happens, it's not the end of the world, and you already have an action plan. This gives an incredible competitive advantage. While others panic at the first signs of turbulence, you maintain icy calm because you've already been in this situation in your head and prepared for it. Thus, negative visualization paradoxically makes you the most resilient and confident player in the market. You don't hope for luck, you are ready for the storm, and that's why your ship will stay afloat. Most business gurus urge you to think positively and visualize only success, imagining yourself standing on the peak with a flag of victory. Stoicism, however, offers an approach that at first glance seems counterintuitive, but in practice proves to be the most powerful strategic tool. Seneca called it premeditatio malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. In the context of modern entrepreneurship, this transforms into deep scenario planning. Let's break down how this works in practice. Instead of indulging in hopes for a perfect product launch, you intentionally ask yourself, what exactly could go wrong? What will we do if a key investor pulls out of the deal tomorrow morning? What will be our clear action plan if a new law makes our business model unprofitable, or if servers crash during peak sales? This is not pessimism or defeatism. It is strategic hygiene and intellectual honesty. In the world of project management, there is a technique, essentially borrowed from the Stoics, called pre-mortem. Unlike post-mortem analysis, where we dissect the causes of failure of an already destroyed project, pre-mortem is conducted before launch. You gather the team and set the task. Imagine that a year has passed, and our project has suffered a complete, crushing fiasco. Now, write a detailed history of exactly how this happened. This exercise uncovers hidden risks that are usually suppressed due to groupthink or the fear of appearing negative. When you mentally experience the worst-case scenario beforehand, two fundamental things happen. First, you become emotionally hardened. The shock of a real problem will be much weaker if you have already experienced it mentally. Second, and this is critically important for business, you shift from passive background anxiety to active planning.
You don't just have hope that everything will turn out fine, but a concrete folder with action protocols for a crisis. The paradox of this Stoic exercise is that detailed preparation for the worst makes you much bolder in achieving the best. Knowing the bottom you can fall to and understanding that even there you can survive and act frees you from paralyzing fear. You stop wasting precious mental resources worrying about the unknown because the unknown has already been studied, measured, and cataloged. You are ready for the storm, and that is why your chances of safely reaching the harbor of success increase exponentially. Imagine your key supplier goes bankrupt, or a competitor releases a product that makes your offering obsolete. Any normal person's first reaction is shock, anger, or fear. But it is at this very moment that Stoicism offers the entrepreneur its most powerful weapon, a concept that Marcus Aurelius formulated with one brilliant phrase: "What stands in the way becomes the way." This is not just a beautiful philosophical quote, it's an algorithm for mental judo that turns the energy of an opponent's blow into your own strength. Let's break down this algorithm for transforming problems into opportunities in detail, as it is a fundamental skill for business survival in uncertain conditions. The first step of the algorithm is the discipline of perception. When a problem arises, our brain tends to label it. It's a catastrophe, it's unfair, it's the end. A Stoic removes judgmental evaluations and leaves only the bare facts. A client left, that's a fact. Is it bad? Not necessarily. It's an event that requires analysis. By removing the emotional coloring, you stop wasting resources on self-pity and switch to a mode of cool observation. You see the situation objectively, like a surgeon seeing a patient. The second step is a shift in perspective. Here we look for a hidden advantage.
In every problem, no matter how destructive it may seem, a seed of opportunity is embedded, not visible at first glance. If you lost a major client, this is an opportunity to diversify risks and stop depending on a single source of income, which will make your business more stable in the long run. If your product received scathing reviews, this is the most honest and free audit of your shortcomings, pointing you to the exact vector for innovation. Instead of asking why me, a Stoic entrepreneur asks, how can I use this? The third step is action directed through the obstacle. We don't bypass the problem, we use it as fuel. Recall the story of how a fire destroyed Thomas Edison's laboratory. Instead of despair, he began rebuilding the very next day, using it as a chance to get rid of old junk and outdated concepts to build everything anew, but better. The obstacle dictates new conditions, and by accepting them, you find unconventional solutions that would have been impossible in comfortable conditions. A crisis forces you to optimize costs, dismiss ineffective employees, and focus on what's most important. Thus, what seemed like a wall becomes a springboard. This approach requires constant practice. Every time you encounter a delivery delay, a bureaucratic barrier, or a technical glitch, you must consciously stop the initial reaction of irritation and activate this algorithm. Ask yourself, what lesson can I learn? What business muscle can I strengthen by overcoming this resistance? Over time, you will notice that you have stopped fearing problems. You will begin to see them as necessary material for building your success. Entrepreneurship, by its very nature, is a problem-solving process. If problems didn't exist, there would be no need for business. Therefore, when you meet an obstacle, welcome it. It's a sign that you are moving, and this is precisely the material from which you will build your path to the top. Amor fati. This Latin phrase translates to love of fate.
It's not just a passive acceptance of what happens, and not just the ability to endure blows. It's something much greater and more radical, especially for an entrepreneur. The concept of amor fati calls us not just to resign ourselves to the inevitable, but to enthusiastically embrace everything life brings us, including losses, crises, and failures. In business, we're accustomed to thinking in terms of success and avoiding failures. When we lose a key client, when a deal falls through, or when legislation changes, the first reaction is usually resistance. We get angry, we look for blame, we spend colossal amounts of mental energy wishing reality were different. Stoicism teaches us that this is a waste of resources. What has already happened is etched in stone. To resist a fact is to fight against reality itself, and in that battle, victory is impossible. Marcus Aurelius used a magnificent metaphor of fire. A weak fire goes out if something heavy and damp is thrown into it, but a strong, raging fire consumes everything that falls into it. It seizes every object thrown into it and uses it as fuel to rise even higher and burn even brighter. For an entrepreneur, amor fati is an instruction manual for turning problems into fuel. Did your startup fail? Good. Now you have invaluable experience that theorists lack, and you know what not to do next time. Did a partner betray you and leave? Good. This is an opportunity to review your ownership structure and find people whose values align with yours. Did the market collapse? Excellent. This is a time when weak players will leave, and you can capture their share if you show flexibility. This is not masochism or an attempt to deceive oneself with false positivity. It's a pragmatic approach to managing reality. When you love your fate, you stop being a victim of circumstances. You become an alchemist who turns any metal into gold. The moment you say yes to what has happened, you instantly regain control. You stop looking back with regret and start looking forward with the question, how can I use this right now? Friedrich Nietzsche, who was inspired by the Stoics, described this state as the formula for human greatness: not to want anything to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not just to bear what is necessary, but to love it. In the context of business, losses are inevitable. You will lose money, time, and people. This is the cost of entry into the game. If you perceive every loss as a tragedy, you will burn out. If you merely endure them, you will become cynical. But if you apply amor fati, every loss becomes a learning payment, a necessary stage on the path to your goal. You begin to see an obstacle not as a barrier that stops movement, but as part of the path itself. Try to apply this to your biggest current problem. Stop asking, why is this happening to me? Ask yourself, how exactly was this event necessary for me to become the leader I am meant to be? It is this shift in consciousness that distinguishes those who break under pressure from those who become stronger than diamond because of it. Lucius Annaeus Seneca was arguably the first productivity coach in history, though his lessons are far harsher and deeper than any modern time management training. In his famous treatise on the shortness of life, he articulates a thought that should become the foundation of thinking for any entrepreneur. He asserts that life is long enough if you know how to use it. The problem is not that we are allotted little time, but that we squander it. For a business owner, time is not just money,
It is the fabric of success, and more importantly, life itself. Seneca draws attention to a remarkable paradox of the human psyche. If someone tries to seize your land or steal part of your capital, you will fiercely resist, perhaps even with weapons. We are incredibly stingy when it comes to material assets.
But when it comes to time, our most valuable and only absolutely irreplaceable resource, we show criminal wastefulness. We allow empty meetings, meaningless conversations, toxic employees, and endless notifications to plunder our hours and days. Seneca teaches us to treat time with the same greed with which the most avaricious miser treats his gold. In the context of entrepreneurship, this means a rigorous audit of your day. You must protect your deep work hours as jealously as you protect your bank account from fraudsters. However, the main enemy here is often not external, but internal. It is procrastination. The Stoic view of procrastination differs from our usual understanding. It is not just laziness or poor self-organization. Seneca calls putting things off until later the greatest tragedy of human existence, because it robs us of today and makes us depend on tomorrow, which is entirely not ours. Entrepreneurs often fall into the trap of a delayed life syndrome, telling themselves, "I'll earn this million, close this investment round, set up operational processes, and then I'll start living peacefully." Seneca harshly ridicules those who plan to start living authentically at 50 or 60 years old. He asks, who guarantees that you will live to that age, and is it not shameful to reserve for real life only the remnants of time and reason? Fighting procrastination the Stoic way is not about using complex planner apps, but about a radical awareness of one's own mortality. Seneca's main advice sounds like a command. Do it immediately. Consider each day a separate, complete life. When you deeply, at an instinctive level, understand that the future is not guaranteed to you or your business, you lose all desire to spend the present moment on fears, doubts, or simulating frantic activity. You begin to invest time only in what brings real results and meaning, cutting off all superfluous things without pity or doubt. We move on to one of the most powerful tools in the Stoic arsenal, which we will conditionally call the essentialism of Marcus Aurelius. Imagine for a second the level of responsibility of a Roman emperor. Daily, his attention was torn apart by state affairs, military strategies, legal disputes, and an endless stream of petitioners. In such chaos, it is impossible to survive if you try to do everything. That is why Marcus Aurelius derived a formula that is vital for every entrepreneur today. In the fourth book of his Meditations, he writes that most of what we say and do is not necessary. If we eliminate this, we will gain more time and more tranquility. Notice he's not talking about time management or delegation. He's talking about the complete elimination of the superfluous. For modern business, this sounds radical. We are used to chasing new trends, adding endless features to products, and agreeing to every meeting, fearing missing an opportunity. But Stoicism teaches us that dispersion is the enemy of perfection. Aurelius suggests that at every step we ask ourselves one tough question: is this truly necessary? This question should become a filter for every project you undertake. When you say no to a mediocre idea, you are actually saying yes to something great. You free up resources for that one project that can change the market. This art of refusal requires courage, because often you have to disappoint people or give up quick money for the sake of a long-term strategy. But remember the emperor's words: by removing the superfluous, you win twice. You do less, but you do it better. This is the path to creating a product that will remain in history instead of dissolving in the noise of mediocrity. The 12th section brings us back to one of the most fundamental concepts of Stoicism, which the philosopher Pierre Hadot accurately called the inner citadel. In the context of modern business, where turbulence has become the new normal, this idea transforms from a beautiful metaphor into a practical survival tool. Imagine your consciousness as a fortress. The world around may be burning, markets may be collapsing, and competitors may be playing an aggressive game. But inside this citadel, peace, order, and clarity are always preserved. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man always has the power to retire within himself, where he will find tranquility and freedom from external anxieties. For an entrepreneur, this is not a call to escapism or ignoring problems. On the contrary, it is a strategy for preserving the main asset, your sanity. The inner citadel is that part of your personality that remains untouched by external circumstances. It is yourself that makes decisions. The Stoics taught that we cannot control external events, be it an economic crisis, a pandemic, or a sudden change in legislation. These things try to breach your defenses, causing fear, anger, or panic. But if you have built your inner citadel, You understand that these events only concern your property, your reputation, or your bank account, but they cannot touch your mind unless you allow it. Psychological resilience here is built on understanding the sovereignty of your judgment. When a crisis occurs, an unstable leader allows chaos to penetrate within. They start making decisions based on emotions, lose sleep, and strategic vision. A Stoic, however, retreats into their citadel. There, in the safety of their mind, they separate facts from their judgments about them. Fact: profit fell by 30%. Judgment: it's a catastrophe, we will all perish. The Stoic discards the judgment and works with the fact. This very ability to keep a cool head when everyone else is losing theirs is the entrepreneur's main superpower. In turbulent times, your inner citadel becomes a fulcrum not only for you, but also for your entire team. People sense when a leader is internally broken, and they sense when a leader is unwavering. Your task is to strengthen the walls of this citadel daily. This is done through the practice of mindfulness, through constant reminders to yourself that your will and your moral choice are the only things that belong to you exclusively. No tax inspector and no dissatisfied client can enter this citadel and make you feel unhappy or humiliated without your consent. This invulnerability provides a colossal competitive advantage. While others spend energy experiencing terror of uncertainty, you, protected by your inner fortress, calmly analyze the situation and look for new opportunities. The inner citadel is a guarantee that even if your business collapses, you, as an individual and as an entrepreneur, will remain whole, ready to start all over again or find a new path, not broken, but merely having gained new experience. Let's talk about the most insidious trap that awaits an entrepreneur, often not during failure, but precisely at the moment of initial success: the ego. In modern business culture, we often confuse ego with self-confidence, but Stoicism draws a strict and fundamental line between them. Confidence is based on real skills, experience, and an objective understanding of one's strengths. Ego, however, is a distortion of reality, a capricious belief in one's own exceptionalism that often outpaces real achievements. Ryan Holiday, a modern thinker and popularizer of Stoicism, highlighted this idea in the title of his book, asserting that ego is the enemy. Why is this critical specifically for startups? Because a startup is essentially a hypothesis that requires constant testing against reality. When a founder receives the first tranche of investments or sees the first enthusiastic press articles, a dangerous narrative can activate in their mind. I am a genius. I cracked the code. I know best. It is at this moment that development stops and disintegration begins.
From a Stoic perspective, the main danger of pride is not that you become an unpleasant person to interact with, but that you lose the ability to learn. The great Stoic Epictetus formulated this precisely. It is impossible to begin to learn what you think you already know. For tech businesses, this phrase sounds like a death sentence. As soon as the ego convinces you that you already understand everything about your product and market, you stop listening to feedback. You start ignoring metrics that contradict your worldview, dismissing them as data errors or user stupidity. You surround yourself with people who agree with you, creating an information vacuum while the market moves ahead. Silicon Valley history is littered with the corpses of companies whose leaders fell in love with their own greatness instead of falling in love with the customer's problem. Pride makes an entrepreneur cling to a mistaken strategy until the last dollar in their account, simply because admitting an error would wound their self-esteem. The Stoic approach offers an antidote, the concept of the eternal student. It doesn't matter how many millions in revenue you have or how many years you've been in the industry, you must maintain intellectual humility. You must love facts more than being right. Stoicism teaches us to separate our self-esteem from external attributes of success, reminding us that the market is an element that is utterly indifferent to your conceit. And here it's not the loudest who survives, but the one who maintains a sober view of things and is ready to learn every day. We move on to the foundation of Stoic ethics, which Marcus Aurelius considered the most valuable treasure of the human soul. We will talk about the 4 cardinal virtues that transform an ordinary manager into a leader capable of weathering any storm. These are wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. In the context of business, these are not abstract philosophical concepts, but concrete decision-making tools. Let's start with wisdom. For a Stoic, wisdom is not extensive reading or the number of MBA degrees. It is practical knowledge,
the ability to separate the true from the false, and most importantly, to distinguish what depends on us from what is beyond our control. In entrepreneurship, wisdom manifests in strategic thinking, when you look at facts, not your projections or fears. It is the ability to see a situation as it is, without emotional coloring, and to make decisions based on reality, not desires. The second virtue is justice. In modern business, where the principle of man eats man often reigns, Stoic justice might seem naive, but this is a profound misconception. For a Stoic, justice means understanding that we are all part of a single whole. In a practical sense, this means building a business on principles of honest value exchange. It is respect for employees, honesty with partners, and responsibility to clients. A leader who practices Stoic justice understands that reputation and trust are assets built over years and destroyed in a second by a dishonest deal. Next comes courage, but not the courage that leads to reckless adventures. Stoic courage is fortitude in the face of difficulties and the readiness to do what is right, even when it is frightening. An entrepreneur shows courage when taking responsibility for a team's mistake, when deciding on a necessary but painful pivot, or when upholding their values in the face of lost profit. It is the strength of spirit to continue working when investors refuse and the market falls. And finally, moderation. In the startup world, which celebrates overwork and unbridled growth at any cost, moderation is your safeguard against burnout and collapse. It is discipline and self-control. Moderation allows a leader not to get intoxicated by success and not to fall into depression from failures.
It is the ability to manage resources effectively, not to inflate staff unnecessarily, and to maintain a clear mind when chaos reigns. Moderation helps an entrepreneur run a marathon, not burn out in a sprint. By combining these four elements, you get a model of Stoic leadership. You make wise decisions, act justly towards people, have the courage to follow your own path, and possess the discipline to see it through. For an entrepreneur, adopting this perspective changes the game. If you treat money as a preferred indifferent, you stop tying your self-worth to the size of your profits. You understand that your capital is simply an external tool, like a hammer or a computer. If the tool breaks or gets lost, the craftsman remains a craftsman. Seneca said that a wise man does not consider himself unworthy of fortune's gifts. He does not love wealth, but he prefers it. He welcomes it into his home, but not into his soul. This creates a healthy distance. When an entrepreneur is too strongly attached to results and money, they begin to act out of fear of loss. This fear paralyzes, leads to conservative, erroneous decisions, or conversely, pushes them into insane ventures to maintain status. The Stoic approach allows you to look at financial losses with cool composure. If the market crashes tomorrow and you lose assets, for a Stoic, this would be a return to the starting point, not the end of life. You simply move from a preferred state to a less preferred state, but your inner core, your mind, and your skills remain untouched. This attitude provides a colossal competitive advantage. While others panic over market volatility, a Stoic maintains clarity of thought. You can take reasonable risks because you have already accepted the possibility of loss and understood that it will not destroy you. You manage your business from a position of strength and independence, not from a position of need and greed. Remember, for a Stoic, money is merely fuel for the manifestation of virtue. A wealthy Stoic has more opportunities to show generosity, justice, and wisdom in managing resources. But if this fuel disappears, the engine of your character will not stall. You must be ready at any moment to part with wealth without regret or hysteria, telling yourself, "I came into this world with nothing, and my true wealth is what is inside my head." It is this inner freedom that truly makes you rich, regardless of the numbers in the financial report. We move on to one of the deepest and most underestimated aspects of Stoicism, which is called sympatheia. In this context, this Greek word means not just emotional attachment, but literally co-feeling or co-participation, the idea that all things in the universe are interconnected and woven into a single web. Ancient Stoics believed in the concept of cosmopolitanism, asserting that we are all citizens of a single world community, not just residents of our city or country. For a modern entrepreneur planning business scaling, this philosophical stance is a powerful tool for removing internal mental barriers. Stoics taught that all people, regardless of their origin, language, cultural codes, or geographical location, are united by the presence of reason and belong to a single human community. In the context of business, this means a fundamental shift in perception. Market boundaries exist only in legal documents and political maps, but not in the nature of human needs. A Stoic entrepreneur views international expansion not as an aggressive conquest of foreign territories, but as a natural dissemination of value. If your product or service truly solves a problem and brings good, then limiting its spread to one city or country means artificially restraining its potential to serve society. Stoic cosmopolitanism helps overcome the fear of cultural differences and uncertainty when entering export markets. Instead of seeing a foreign market as an alien, incomprehensible, and hostile environment, you, relying on Stoic logic, see there the same people with the same basic fears, desires, and aspirations for happiness. This changes the very paradigm of product development and marketing. You stop focusing on superficial differences and start looking for universal common ground understandable to every rational being. Moreover, this approach dictates high ethical standards when building global supply chains.
For a Stoic, a partner or employee on the other side of the world is not an abstract resource, but a fellow citizen of the global polis, deserving the same justice and respect as your neighbor. Thus, business becomes not just a mechanism for profit extraction from different jurisdictions, but a connecting link that unites disparate parts of the world into a single, effectively functioning system based on mutual benefit and rational cooperation. We've come to perhaps the most critical topic: crisis management. This is the moment when Plan A has failed, Plan B has proven ineffective, and a real threat of bankruptcy or reputational disaster looms on the horizon. In modern business, crisis is not an anomaly, it's the environment. And it is here that Stoicism transforms from a beautiful philosophical theory into the most powerful tactical weapon in your arsenal. The first rule of a Stoic in the epicenter of chaos is a complete halt to the initial reaction. Evolutionarily, our brain screams fight or flight in moments of danger.
An entrepreneur starts to fuss, write angry emails, make impulsive decisions simply to drown out anxiety with action. Stoicism teaches us to pause. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be like a rock. The waves constantly break against it, but it stands unmoved, and around it, the agitated waters become still." Your first task is to remove the emotional coloring from the event. Losing a major client is not a tragedy or a betrayal. It's simply a fact of changed cash flow. A cash flow gap is not the end of the world, but a mathematical problem with new variables. As soon as you remove the words terrible, catastrophic, and unfair from your mind, you are left alone with the bare data. This is the objective representation about which the ancient Stoics wrote. You must see the situation as it is, not as it seems to your frightened ego. Next comes the strict dichotomy of control. In a crisis, the number of factors you cannot influence sharply increases. The market crashed, the law changed, a key employee resigned overnight. If you spend mental energy regretting these events, you will burn out in 48 hours. Stoic crisis management demands ruthlessly cutting off everything that has already happened and everything that is beyond your control. You focus only on what can be done right now, this second, with the resources you still have. Here, the principle of amor fati, love of fate, comes into play. This is not passive submission, it is aggressive acceptance of reality. You don't just endure the crisis, you use it as fuel. Seneca reminded us that fire tests gold and misfortune tests strong people. A crisis exposes weak business processes that you didn't notice in calm times. It removes unnecessary people from the team and forces you to move faster. A Stoic looks at a burning project and asks themselves, what is this teaching me right now, and what benefit can I extract from these ashes for the next step? Remember that panic is contagious, but so is calm. When a team sees a leader who does not deny the problem, does not bury their head in the sand, but also does not tremble before circumstances, it stabilizes the system better than any motivational speeches. In a crisis, you are not fighting the world, you are synchronizing with it, acting coolly, precisely, and without regrets about the past. The obstacle becomes the way. This is how Stoicism transforms potential collapse into a point of growth. Let's move from theory to real-world practice and examine the cases of two of the most critical modern proponents of Stoicism in business, Tim Ferriss and Ryan Holiday. These are not just best-selling authors, they are entrepreneurs who built their media empires and investment portfolios using Stoicism as an operating system for decision-making in conditions of high uncertainty. Let's start with Tim Ferriss.
He openly states that Stoicism saved his life and became the foundation of his success as an early investor in giants like Uber, Facebook, and Shopify. The main tool Ferriss adapted from Seneca's philosophy is a technique he called fear setting. Most entrepreneurs are obsessed with goal setting, but Ferriss realized that what paralyzes us is not the absence of goals, but an unclear, vague fear of consequences. When Ferriss made his riskiest decisions, such as stepping away from the operational management of his own supplement company to write The 4-Hour Workweek, he used precisely this method. He literally sat down and wrote out the most catastrophic scenarios on paper. What would happen if I lost everything? What is the real damage on a scale of 1 to 10? How could I get back to square one? The Stoic practice of premeditation of evils, or premeditatio malorum, allowed him to see that most business risks are reversible. As soon as he understood that the worst-case scenario was not death or shame, but merely temporary financial difficulties and the need to get a job as a bartender, the fear disappeared. This allowed him to act aggressively where others hesitated. For Ferriss, Stoicism is a tool for removing emotional noise from the logical equations of investing. Now let's look at Ryan Holiday. His path is interesting because he was the director of marketing at American Apparel during its most high-profile scandals and crises. He witnessed the company's collapse from within and saw how ego destroyed a billion-dollar business. This experience formed the basis of his understanding of Stoic discipline of perception. Holiday's key decision was a radical career change. He left the peak of his marketing career to write books about ancient philosophy. From a classical capitalist perspective, this seemed insane and a step backward in income. But Holiday applied the principle of the dichotomy of control. He understood that a corporate career, however successful, made him dependent on external factors, on the whims of the market and boards of directors. Writing and founding his own agency gave him autonomy, the highest Stoic value. His concept of "the obstacle is the way" is not just a beautiful phrase, but an algorithm for action. When Holiday encountered media attacks or launch failures, he didn't waste energy complaining. He used the negative energy of the situation as fuel for the next step. He turned his observations of other businesses' collapses into the bestseller, Ego is the Enemy. In other words, he literally monetized his obstacles. Analyzing their decisions, we see a common pattern. Both Ferriss and Holiday do not ignore emotions, but they do not allow emotions to steer the ship. When a crisis hits, Ferriss activates worst-case scenario logic to understand that he will survive. Holiday activates the discipline of perception to find advantage in a problem. For an entrepreneur, this means that Stoicism is not passive acceptance of fate, but on the contrary, an active, even aggressive strategy for managing risks and opportunities. They proved that a philosophical mindset in business is a competitive advantage, allowing one to maintain clarity of thought when everyone else is panicking. Now let's move from the leader's personal effectiveness to scaling these ideas throughout the entire company. Building a corporate culture on Stoic principles is not an attempt to make every employee read Seneca or Marcus Aurelius. It is creating an operating system for collective decision-making, where emotional resilience and rationality become part of your business's DNA. The foundation of such a culture is built on a common vocabulary and a shared understanding of what is within our control. In a Stoic organization, employees stop wasting energy complaining about market conditions, competitors' actions, or economic crises.
Instead, all the team's energy is directed towards internal processes, product quality, and customer communication. The leader must convey the idea that external events are merely the backdrop in which we operate, and our success depends solely on the quality of our reactions to these events. This reduces collective anxiety and eliminates a victim culture, replacing it with a culture of responsibility. Another important tool is the implementation of the practice of premeditatio malorum, or anticipation of difficulties, into business processes. In management language, this is often called pre-mortem analysis. Before launching any major project, the team does not engage in self-deception through toxic positivism, assuring each other that everything will be perfect. On the contrary, you gather and honestly discuss what could go wrong. You visualize failure to prepare action plans in advance. When employees understand that mistakes and difficulties are an expected part of the journey, not a catastrophe, they act more boldly and decisively. The principle of objective perception is also critically important. In a Stoic culture, the rejection of emotional labels is encouraged. Losing a major client, missing delivery deadlines, or receiving negative feedback is not horror or the end of the world. It is simply data, facts. The team's task is to separate the fact from emotional interpretation. We don't look for culprits to punish them, we look for the cause of a system failure to eliminate it. This atmosphere creates psychological safety, where people are not afraid to admit mistakes, which exponentially accelerates the learning of the entire company. Finally, Stoicism in corporate culture places virtue and ethics above immediate profit. In Stoic terminology, profit is a preferred indifferent. Yes, we strive for it, but not at the cost of our principles. When a team sees that management is willing to forego a dirty deal for the sake of reputation and fidelity to its values, this creates incredible loyalty. People want to work not just where money is paid, but where there is integrity and meaning. Such a culture becomes a powerful competitive advantage that cannot be copied. We have arrived at one of the most painful topics in modern business culture, often referred to as work-life balance. However, Stoicism invites us to abandon this term, as it implies a constant conflict between work and existence, as if they are two warring territories. Instead of seeking compromises, the Stoics propose the concept of living in harmony with nature. For an entrepreneur, this is a fundamental paradigm shift. In Stoic philosophy, nature is not only the environment, but also your own human essence, your mind and physiology. Often, as business creators, we try to deceive this nature. We try to work 20 hours a day, ignore the need for recovery, suppress stress with liters of coffee, and consider burnout a badge of honor. Seneca and Marcus Aurelius would have called this madness, contrary to the natural order of things. Living in harmony with nature means recognizing that you are a biological organism with a rational mind, and both these aspects require respect. If your business regimen destroys your body, you are going against nature, and nature will inevitably take its toll through illness or breakdown. Stoicism teaches us to see rest not as a waste of time, but as a necessary part of the cycle, just as winter is necessary for the earth for a new harvest. One cannot demand eternal summer and eternal fertility from oneself. Harmony with nature also means understanding your true inclinations. Many entrepreneurs suffer trying to play roles that are not natural to them, imposed by the market or investors. A Stoic asks themselves whether what they are doing aligns with their inner constitution. If your work turns into daily self-violence, it's a sure sign that you have deviated from the natural path.
Harmony occurs when your business becomes a natural extension of your values and talents, rather than a forced labor for status. This doesn't mean there won't be difficulties. It means difficulties will be endured more easily because they are part of your natural path, not the result of fighting with yourself. Thus, Stoic balance is not a mathematical division of hours between office and home, but the integration of your activities into a healthy, holistic system where work supports life rather than consuming it. We approach the deepest question that the philosophy of Stoicism poses to every leader. What will remain after you? In the daily pursuit of quarterly figures, market share, and capitalization growth, it is incredibly easy to forget a simple truth. None of these material assets are eternal. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reminded himself that both the great conqueror Alexander the Great and his simple mule driver eventually ended up in the same place, turning to dust. Death, as the great equalizer, erases statuses and bank accounts. But the Stoics speak of this not to cast you into despondency or devalue your efforts. On the contrary, the ancient principle of memento mori, remember death, serves as the most powerful filter for strategic decision-making. If you realize that your time is limited, would you spend it on petty corporate intrigues, on meaningless accumulation of excessive wealth, or on inflating your own ego? Unlikely. The focus inevitably shifts. You begin to think not about what you can take from the world, but about what impact your activity leaves on the lives of other people. The legacy of a Stoic entrepreneur is measured not by a line in the ranking of the wealthiest people, but by the quality of the relationships he built and the real benefit his product brought to society. Seneca asserted that life is long if it is filled with meaning and activity for the common good. Your business in this context ceases to be just a mechanism for profit extraction and becomes a tool for influencing reality, a tool for service. The culture you built within the company, the ethical values you transmitted to your employees, the honesty and fairness with which you treated partners and clients, even in the most difficult times, this is what continues to live and resonate, even when you are no longer in the negotiation room. Stoicism teaches us that the only true good that belongs to us entirely is our virtue, our character. Your true legacy is an example of resilience in the face of crisis, an example of nobility in competitive struggle, and an example of wisdom in managing people. These are the seeds you plant today, with a full understanding that you may never see them grow into adult trees providing shade for future generations. But it is in this selfless creation that true greatness lies. To build, not to carve your name in stone, but to make this world a little more ordered, rational, and just than it was before you arrived. When you look at your business through the prism of eternity, the fear of temporary failure or financial loss recedes into the background. What remains is a pure, unwavering intention to do your work well and rightly here and now. For ultimately, all that we can truly leave behind in eternity is a good memory and deeds done for the common good. This is the highest point of an entrepreneur's realization. We have reached the end of our great journey into the world of Stoicism for business. We have dissected the theory, tools, and mental models, but knowledge without application is merely intellectual baggage. For this philosophy to become your real competitive advantage, it must go beyond this video and become part of your DNA, your daily firmware. Let's solidify a concrete, step-by-step algorithm of actions that will transform you from a mere entrepreneur into a Stoic leader. Your day begins not with checking messengers and news, but with adjusting your internal lens.
This is morning preparation. Spend just 5 minutes practicing the anticipation of difficulties. Ask yourself, what could go wrong today? A deal falling through? An incompetent employee? A tax audit? Or simply traffic jams? Play out these scenarios in your head without fear. Tell yourself, I am ready for this, and none of it will break my spirit. Remind yourself of your principles. This is your mental armor that you put on before stepping into the world of chaos. During the workday, when you are at the epicenter of events, your main practice is the dichotomy of control. Business is a constant flow of problems. In a moment of stress, when emotions begin to boil, take a Stoic pause. Literally stop for a second. Ask yourself one fundamental question. Does this depend on me? If the event is beyond your control, the market crashed, a competitor is dumping prices, a client left, accept it as a fact, like the weather outside. Don't waste energy on anger. Direct all resources to what is within your power, your reaction, your decisions, finding new strategies. Turn every obstacle into a path, every no into an opportunity for growth. Evening is a time for honest audit. As Seneca did, before bed, conduct a retrospective of the day. This is not self-flagellation, it is data analysis. Where did you lose your composure? Where did fear paralyze your decision? And where did you act virtuously and wisely? Write it down. Keeping a diary for an entrepreneur is not sentimentality. It is a report to the board of directors, where the only director is your conscience. This analysis will allow you to be 1% better tomorrow than today. Stoicism is not a magic pill. It is an operating system that is rewritten over years. But by implementing these rituals, morning setup, daily mindfulness, and evening analysis,
you will notice how the quality of your life and your business changes. You will become the leader who remains a rock in any storm, someone to lean on and follow. Entrepreneurship is a marathon in conditions of complete uncertainty, and Stoicism is the best equipment for this distance. If this deep dive into the philosophy of Stoicism has been useful to you, if you have found tools here that will make your business and your life stronger, I ask you to take an important action right now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos that will help you develop. Be sure to like it. This is the best signal for us and the algorithms that intelligent content is in demand. And write in the comments what one practice you will incorporate into your arsenal starting tomorrow. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Act wisely, build for centuries. See you.